Okay, so I know we've already done 6-5, but I've kind of added another 6-5 in here that isn't in the textbook, just so that we can mix all of the different ways of factoring together, because of course you're not going to have all the same factoring all in a row. So let's talk about the steps again. So the first thing that we want to do is you always want to take out a greatest common factor. So you can see for 1a, there is no greatest common factor. The second step is to count the terms. There are 3 terms. So if there are 3 terms, remember what we want to do is we want to backwards FOIL. So for this one, and it's totally up to you, you don't have to do it, but I'm thinking I would like to rearrange the terms and put the negative x squared first, minus 2x plus 3. And then remember how I don't like the negative 1 in front of here. So even though there isn't technically a GCF, I'm going to factor out a negative 1, which would give me x squared plus 2x minus 3. I just think that's going to be easier to factor. So because there are 3 terms, we're going to backwards FOIL. So again, how do I break up the x squared? That's x. And now I need 2 numbers that multiply together to get negative 3 and add together to get positive 2. So those would be a positive 3 and a negative 1. And now you are factored completely. So let's look at B. So again, think of the steps. What is the first thing you always do? You look for a GCF, which there is a GCF here. I can factor a 2x out of both of these terms, which would give me x squared minus 25. Now when I count my terms, there are 2. It's a binomial, so it's a difference. So it's either a difference of squares or a difference of cubes. And you can see that this is going to be a difference of squares. So remember the rule for difference of squares. You just take the square root plus the square root times the square root minus the square root. A lot of rules that you have to know, but you get them as you practice more and more, which is why we have this section. Then you should be getting them better. What you could do is you could totally stop the video now, do the rest of the problems, and then come back and watch as I do them and check your answers. Okay, so for C, there is no GCF. There are 2 terms. It's a binomial. It's a sum. Remember, you can't factor a sum of squares. This, in fact, is a sum of cubes. So you have to use your rule with SOAP. Remember that rule? So the cube root of x cubed is x, and the cube root of 8 is 2. So remember, for a sum of cubes, it's going to factor into a binomial times a trinomial. So in the binomial, you're going to end up with x plus 2, same sign. And then for the trinomial, this is the one where I said you just have to memorize the rule. You're going to square the x, opposite sign, multiply those 2 little guys together. That's 2x, always positive. Square the 2, and that gives you 4. And remember, I promised that that would never factor any further. So we're just going to keep going, all the different examples. Factoring is so important. So if we go ahead and if we look at D here, there is no greatest common factor for all of the terms. And when you count them, you can see that there are 4. Remember, if there's more than 3 terms, you're going to do a grouping. We're going to group 2 and 2. So let's go ahead and let's take the greatest common factor out of my first group of 2. That's going to be x squared, which leaves me with x minus 2. Now I have to take a greatest common factor out of my second group of 2. I need a positive x, so that should tell you I'm going to take out a negative, and I'm going to take out a negative 36, which leaves me with x minus 2. Now, remember, for grouping, I look at that as 2 big terms, so it's going to give me an x minus 2. When that's gone, I'm left with x squared minus 36. And the question is, am I done? Hopefully you realize, no, I'm not, because this can be factored further as a difference of two squares. And it factors into x plus 6 times x minus 6. Let's go on to E. So here we go. There's no GCF. So let's, because there are 4 terms, let's do grouping. What can I factor out of this group of 2? Well, they have an x in common, which leaves me with y minus 2. What will come out of this group of 2? I'm thinking we're going to take out a negative 3, which would, again, when you divide it back in, leave me with y minus 2. Think of this as 2 big terms. They have a y minus 2 in common. When that is taken out, we are left with an x minus 3. All right, look at F. Well, let's see. There's no GCF. There are 3 terms, so we will backwards FOIL. You might quick notice that, this is a perfect square, is a perfect square trinomial, but 15 is not a perfect square, so it's not. So we are going to resort to guess and check. Now I'm going to guess and check. Remember, I showed you the grouping way. You could always do that if you'd like, but I'm going to do guess and check. So I'm going to split up the 16x squared into 4x and 4x, and again, I'm guessing. It may be wrong. 15 can be 1 and 15, or it can be 5 and 3. I'm going to choose 5 and 3. So let's go ahead and let's do my check. So remember, if I FOIL it back out, I've got to end up with, in the middle, a negative 32. So I get 16x squared. Outside, I get 12x. Inside, I get 20x. Can I get a negative 32 out of a 12 and a 20? Absolutely. And remember, since the last sign is positive, that means both of the signs are the same. They're whatever the first sign is. So they're both negative, and there you are factored there. So we guessed fairly well, fairly quickly. So this is another one. I'm going to flip-flop and put the negative 60 a squared b squared first. I just think it's, oops, I need a b there. I just think it's easier to factor this way. Now I'm going to factor out a negative 1. I know it's going to take me a couple of steps, but, you know, it's easier for me to do that. So that's what I'm going to do, because I like it much better in this form. So let's go ahead and let's, again, there are 3 terms, so I'm going to backwards FOIL. Not really crazy about that being a 60, but I'm going to have to get over it. So 60, how can I break that up? Oh my goodness, 1 and 60, 2 and 30, 3 and 20, 4 and 15, 5 and 12, 6 and 10. Now notice I said 5 and 12, and then I happen to notice that that middle number is a 7. So I think I'm going to go there first. 5AB and 12AB. Notice I need the A and the B because it's 60A squared B squared. And then remember, the 1 is just going to split up into 1 and 1. Now I need to FOIL it back out to get a 7. Now remember, if the last sign is negative, that means you're going to have 1 of each. So outside I get a 5AB, inside I get a 12AB. I can get a 7 out of there, and since I need a positive 7, it's going to be 12AB in the middle and minus 5AB on the outside. And that is now factored. All right, let's keep going. No GCF. I count 3 terms, so here we go. I'm going to backwards FOIL, although because this is a 1, it's going to be a little bit easier. So x to the 4th will break up into x squared and x squared. What can I multiply together to get positive 9 and add together to get negative 10? Well, that's going to be negative 9 and negative